In the heart of a raging inferno, a black firefighter, a decorated captain leading his men, was brutally assaulted by an arrogant racist cop. The officer, blinded by prejudice and a thirst for dominance, saw not a hero saving lives but a target for his contempt. He never imagined that this single act of violence against one would ignite the unbreakable solidarity of an entire fire crew, leading them to down their hoses and walk off the scene in an unprecedented act of defiance that sent shockwaves through the city. Friends and viewers, welcome. The story we share today is one of raw courage, profound betrayal, and the extraordinary power of solidarity in the face of injustice, set against the terrifying backdrop of a life-threatening blaze. It's about what happens when a hero is attacked by someone who should have been an ally. If narratives that explore the bonds of brotherhood and the courage to take a stand ignite your spirit, please subscribe and join our community. Your support helps us bring these vital stories to light. Thank you for being here. Captain Marcus Mark Stone was a man forged in fire both literally and figuratively. At 40, he was the seasoned, respected leader of Engine Company 17, stationed in the heart of Oakhaven's diverse, often challenging, West End district. His crew, a tight-knit, multicultural brotherhood of men and women, known affectionately as the Sentinels, revered him. They weren't just colleagues. They were family bound by the shared dangers they faced daily, the lives they saved, and the quiet understanding that in the heart of a blaze, their unwavering trust in one another was their most crucial piece of equipment. Mark, a tall, powerfully built black man with eyes that held both the warmth of a born leader and the steely resolve of a veteran firefighter, had earned his captain's bars through years of dedicated service, countless acts of bravery, and an innate ability to make life-or-death decisions with calm, clear-headed precision. He was known for his tactical brilliance on the fireground, his unwavering commitment to his crew's safety, and his deep, abiding compassion for the citizens they served, regardless of their background or station in life. Engine 17's firehouse was more than just a workplace, it was a second home. The scent of diesel, coffee, and lingering wood smoke was its perfume. The walls were adorned with commendations, photos of past crews, and children's drawings sent by grateful families. Here, Mark fostered an environment of mutual respect, rigorous training, and an almost sacred sense of duty. His team reflected the city's mosaic. There was Sal DeLuca, the grizzled Italian-American engineer who could coax miracles from their aging pumper. Maria Rodriguez, a fierce and determined young firefighter, often the first through a smoke-filled doorway. Jake Preacher Johnson, a quiet, thoughtful man who always seemed to know what to say to comfort a victim, and a dozen others, each with their own story, their own strengths, all united under Mark's leadership. They had faced down infernos in crumbling tenements, rescued families from flash floods, and cut victims from mangled car wrecks. Their bond was their hidden power, an unspoken covenant of loyalty so profound that an attack on one was an attack on all. This unspoken oath, forged in shared peril, was about to be tested as never before. The city of Oakhaven, like many urban centers, grappled with complex socio-economic issues and an uneasy relationship between its communities and its police department. While many Oakhaven Police Department (OPD) officers were dedicated professionals, a persistent element within the force operated with an old guard mentality, resistant to reform and often exhibiting biased behavior, particularly in neighborhoods like the West End. Officer Vince Kincaid was a prime example of this problematic element. Kincaid was a patrolman with a reputation for aggressive tactics, a short fuse, and a barely concealed disdain for anyone who didn't fit his narrow, prejudiced worldview. He had a particular animosity towards firefighters, perhaps born from a sense of interagency rivalry or a resentment of the public admiration firefighters often received. He viewed them as glory hogs and had been known to obstruct or challenge their authority at emergency scenes, always seeking to assert his own dominance. He had crossed paths with Captain Stone and Engine 17 before, minor skirmishes over scene control or traffic management, encounters that always left Mark with a knot of frustration and a sense of Kincaid's simmering irrational hostility. The call came in just after midnight on a bitterly cold February night. A multi-alarm blaze at the old Northwood textile warehouse, a massive derelict brick structure on the industrial outskirts of the West End. These old mills were notorious fire traps, mazes of dry timber, flammable chemicals, and structural instability. Engine 17 was first on the scene. As they rounded the corner, the night sky was already an angry, pulsating orange, thick black smoke billowing hundreds of feet into the air, carrying the acrid stench of burning history. Flames licked from a dozen broken windows, a roaring beast threatening to consume the entire block, which included several occupied residential buildings just across a narrow alleyway. "All right, Sentinels, let's go to work." Mark's voice, amplified by the truck's PA, cut through the roar of the fire and the wail of approaching sirens. "DeLuca, get us a hydrant, full pressure. Rodriguez Johnson with me, 2.5-inch line, primary attack through the loading dock. We need to create a defensive line to protect those exposures on Bravo's side. Move, move, move." His crew sprang into action with practiced, almost balletic efficiency. They knew their roles, trusted their captain's strategy implicitly. Mark, his face already smudged with soot, his eyes scanning the inferno with a general's tactical acumen, plunged into the smoke-choked chaos, leading his team towards the heart of the beast. He was focused, adrenalized, every sense heightened. He was in his element, a commander on his battlefield, his sole objective to save lives and property, to push back the destructive fury of the flames. He had no idea that a different kind of destructive fury, human and deeply personal, was about to erupt amidst the chaos, an act of malice that would force him and his crew to make an unthinkable choice. The scene at the Northwood textile warehouse fire was a maelstrom of organized chaos, a terrifying ballet of flashing lights, roaring flames, and the desperate, coordinated efforts of Oakhaven's bravest. Captain Mark Stone and Engine 17 were at the epicenter, battling the inferno with a courage that bordered on the sublime. They had established a primary attack line, pushing deep into the warehouse's smoke-filled loading dock area, trying to cut off the fire's spread towards the vulnerable residential buildings on the Bravo exposure. The heat was intense, a physical blow that stole the breath and seared the skin even through their heavy turnout gear. Visibility was near zero, the acrid smoke a blinding, choking fog. Mark, his voice hoarse but authoritative over the radio, directed his team, his every command precise, his presence a bulwark against the overwhelming power of the blaze. It was in this crucible of extreme danger and focused effort that Officer Vince Kincaid arrived, not as a supportive ally in a multi-agency emergency, but as an agent of discord. Kincaid, his patrol car parked haphazardly, blocking a crucial access point for incoming ladder trucks, swaggered onto the fire ground, his expression a mixture of self-importance and barely concealed resentment. He immediately began to bark orders at a group of younger firefighters from another company who were struggling to secure a secondary water supply, his tone condescending, his instructions tactically unsound and contradictory to the established fire command structure. Mark, emerging briefly from the smoke to coordinate with his relief crew, spotted Kincaid's disruptive interference. His primary concern was the safety of his people and the effective management of the fire. Kincaid was creating a dangerous diversion. "Officer Kincaid!" Mark called out, his voice strained but firm, gesturing for the officer to come over to the ad hoc command post they'd established near Engine 17. "I need that access road cleared for incoming apparatus, and my sector commanders are handling hydrant assignments. Please coordinate any police activity through the incident commander at the main CP." Kincaid sauntered over, a sneer playing on his lips. Well, if it isn't Captain King Stone, running the whole show as usual. His voice was laced with sarcasm. "I'm securing this perimeter, Stone. Got reports of potential looters, maybe even squatters inside. This is a police matter now." "This is an active fire ground, Kincaid," Mark retorted, his patience already thin, the life-and-death urgency of the blaze leaving no room for interagency squabbles. "My priority is firefighting and preventing extension to those occupied buildings. Your men are blocking access for essential equipment. I need you to move your vehicle and ensure your officers aren't interfering with established fire operations. We can address your looter concerns once the immediate fire threat is mitigated." Kincaid's face flushed an ugly red. He clearly didn't appreciate being given directives, especially by a black fire captain he viewed with disdain. "Are you telling me how to do my job, Stone?" he spat, stepping closer, invading Mark's personal space. "I'm the law here, and I say this scene needs to be controlled by OPD, not by a bunch of hose-draggers playing hero." The insult was deliberate, designed to provoke. Mark, though seething internally, held his ground, his training in de-escalation kicking in despite the extreme stress. "Officer, I am the incident commander for this sector until a higher-ranking fire chief arrives. Your actions are currently impeding emergency operations and endangering lives. I am asking you professionally to relocate your vehicle and coordinate with the unified command structure." "I don't take orders from you," Kincaid snarled, his hand dropping to his sidearm, a gesture of naked aggression. "You firefighters think you own every scene. Well, you don't own this one." What happened next was shockingly fast, a blur of unwarranted violence amidst the already chaotic backdrop of the inferno. As Mark turned slightly to radio his engineer about a pressure drop in their line, Kincaid, perhaps emboldened by Mark's momentary distraction, or simply overcome by his own festering rage and prejudice, lunged forward. He shoved Mark hard in the chest, a two-handed blow that sent the much larger firefighter stumbling back several feet, his helmet askew. "You think you can disrespect me?" Kincaid screamed, his face contorted with fury. Before Mark could fully recover his balance or comprehend the unprovoked assault, Kincaid followed up, his movements fueled by a viciousness that was horrifying to witness. He grabbed Mark by the front of his heavy turnout coat, yanking him forward, then slammed him against the side of Engine 17's pumper truck. The clang of Mark's air tank hitting the metal was sickeningly loud. "I'm in charge here, you understand me?" Kincaid yelled, his face inches from Mark's, spittle flying. He still had one hand gripping Mark's coat, the other now fumbling for his handcuffs. "You're obstructing a police investigation. You're under arrest for assaulting an officer." The accusation was ludicrous, a grotesque inversion of reality. Mark, dazed from the impact and the sheer audacity of the attack, could only stare back in disbelief. He hadn't raised a hand, hadn't uttered a threat. He had been assaulted in the middle of a 5-alarm fire by a police officer whose actions were not just unprofessional, but criminally reckless. The acrid smoke burned his lungs. The roar of the fire filled his ears, but the most immediate searing reality was the hateful, contorted face of Officer Vince Kincaid, and the cold, brutal knowledge that he was being framed, attacked, and humiliated while trying to save lives. His crew, his sentinels, were just yards away, their attention momentarily diverted by a sudden flare-up on the roofline. They hadn't seen the initial shove, but the commotion, the sickening thud, was now drawing their horrified attention. The fire was raging, but a different, more personal, and far uglier inferno had just been ignited on the fireground. The sickening thud of Captain Stone's air tank against the side of Engine 17 cut through the roar of the blaze and the cacophony of the fireground like a gunshot. Sal DeLuca, Engine 17's veteran engineer, was the first of the crew to whip his head around, his experienced eyes instantly registering the unnatural tableau. His captain, a man of immense strength and composure, pinned against their truck by a snarling, aggressive police officer, Maria Rodriguez and Jake Johnson, who had been wrestling with a kinked hose line nearby, saw it a split second later. Their faces, already grimy with soot and sweat, contorted first in disbelief, then in a surge of protective fury. "Cap, what the hell?" Sal roared, abandoning his pump panel and striding towards the confrontation, his heavy boots crunching on the debris-strewn asphalt. Maria and Jake were right behind him, their firefighting tools momentarily forgotten. Officer Kincaid, still gripping Mark's turnout coat, his face flushed with adrenaline and rage, seemed momentarily startled by the sudden appearance of Engine 17's crew. He hadn't counted on their immediate unified intervention. He tightened his grip on Mark as if to reassert his dominance. "Stay back," Kincaid barked at the approaching firefighters. "This man is under arrest. He assaulted me. He's obstructing a police investigation." "Assaulted you? Are you insane, Kincaid?" Sal DeLuca shot back, his voice a gravelly growl. Sal had been a firefighter in Oakhaven for 30 years. He'd seen it all, and he had zero tolerance for bullies, especially those in uniform. Captain Stone wouldn't assault a fly unless it was threatening his crew. "We all know your reputation, Kincaid. What did you do?" Mark, though still dazed from the impact and the sheer audacity of Kincaid's attack, found his voice. "He shoved me, Sal, unprovoked, then slammed me against the truck. He's lost his damn mind." Mark's voice was strained, but his eyes, when they met Kincaid's, blazed with a cold, controlled anger. Maria Rodriguez, smaller in stature but radiating a fierce intensity, stepped forward, her eyes locked on Kincaid. "Let him go, officer. Now! You're interfering with a captain in the middle of a 5-alarm fire. People's lives are at stake. Whatever personal beef you have, it can wait." Kincaid, now facing not just one firefighter, but 3 increasingly incensed members of a notoriously tight-knit crew, seemed to hesitate. But his arrogance, his deeply ingrained prejudice against Mark, and his unwillingness to back down in front of an audience, quickly overrode any flicker of common sense. "He's a criminal," Kincaid insisted, his voice rising to a near shriek, "and you're all abetting him. I'll have every one of you written up for obstruction." He fumbled for his radio, likely to call for police backup, to escalate the situation further rather than diffuse it. It was at this critical juncture that other firefighters from newly arriving companies, as well as a battalion chief, B.C. Walker, drawn by the escalating commotion and the stalled primary attack, began to converge on the scene near Engine 17. They saw a decorated fire captain, a respected leader, being physically restrained by a patrol officer whose reputation for troublemaking was an open secret in the city's emergency services circles. They saw the disbelief and fury on the faces of Engine 17's crew. They heard Kincaid's wild accusations, which rang utterly false to anyone who knew Mark Stone's character. B.C. Walker, a no-nonsense veteran with an authoritative presence, pushed his way through the gathering crowd of firefighters. "Kincaid, what in the Sam Hill is going on here? Release Captain Stone immediately. We have a 3-story warehouse fully involved with exposures on 2 sides, and you're playing cops and robbers with my lead attack captain." Kincaid, momentarily flustered by the arrival of a higher-ranking fire officer, loosened his grip on Mark slightly, but didn't let go. "Sir, this man assaulted me. He was impeding my investigation into potential criminal activity within the structure." "Your investigation?" B.C. Walker's voice dripped with incredulity. "Your primary duty at a fire scene, officer, is to support fire operations and ensure public safety, not to launch some harebrained solo investigation and assault my personnel. Captain Stone, are you all right?" "I've been better, Chief," Mark said, his voice tight. He subtly tried to shrug off Kincaid's grip, but the officer held firm, his knuckles white. The tension was unbearable. The roar of the fire, the hiss of water from other lines, the crackle of radios, all seemed to fade into the background as this ugly personal confrontation reached its flashpoint. The other firefighters were murmuring, their expressions growing darker, their loyalty clearly with their own. They had all experienced police officers overstepping their bounds at scenes, but this physical assault on a captain in the middle of a dangerous firefight was unprecedented. Sal DeLuca took another step forward, his massive frame radiating menace. "Kincaid, I'm telling you for the last time, let go of our captain." His voice was a low rumble, more dangerous than any shout. Kincaid, perhaps finally sensing the overwhelming tide of hostility from the assembled firefighters, the sheer number of angry, soot-stained faces glaring at him, made a fatal miscalculation. Instead of de-escalating, he reached for his pepper spray. "Back off, all of you, or you'll all be facing charges." That was the spark. The sight of Kincaid threatening an entire group of firefighters after assaulting their captain was too much. The unspoken code of the fire service, an unwavering solidarity in the face of danger, a fierce loyalty to their own, kicked in with overwhelming force. This wasn't just about Mark Stone anymore. It was about respect. It was about safety. It was about the fundamental integrity of their profession being violated by an out-of-control cop. The rising action had crested, and the hidden power of Engine 17's brotherhood, now amplified by the support of their colleagues from across the city, was about to make itself known in a way Oakhaven would never forget. The escalation, fueled by Kincaid's arrogance and prejudice, was about to trigger an extraordinary and unprecedented consequence. The moment Officer Kincaid reached for his pepper spray, a collective growl seemed to emanate from the assembled firefighters. It wasn't a conscious decision, not a planned action, but an instinctive, visceral reaction to a threat against one of their own, and now against all of them. The air crackled with a tension far more explosive than the raging inferno just yards away. This was the tipping point. Captain Mark Stone, seeing Kincaid's hand move, knowing the blinding agony that pepper spray could inflict, and how it would incapacitate not just him, but potentially his entire crew if the wind shifted, made a split-second decision. He wasn't going to allow this unhinged officer to escalate the situation further, to endanger more lives. Neither his crews nor the civilians whose homes were threatened by the spreading blaze. With a surge of adrenaline that momentarily overrode the pain from being slammed against the truck, Mark twisted sharply, using Kincaid's own grip on his coat as leverage. He didn't strike out, didn't throw a punch. Instead, he executed a perfect practiced hip throw, a defensive maneuver he'd learned years ago in a self-defense class, designed to neutralize a threat without causing undue injury. Kincaid, caught completely off guard by the sudden, powerful movement from a man he'd assumed was cowed, yelped in surprise as his feet left the ground. He landed heavily on his backside, the pepper spray skittering away across the asphalt. The handcuffs he'd been fumbling for clattered uselessly beside him. He sat there for a stunned moment, his face a comical mask of shock and outrage, the wind completely knocked out of him. Before Kincaid could scramble up or any other officer could react, Mark Stone straightened his turnout coat, his helmet still slightly askew, his face grim but resolute. He looked not at the sputtering Kincaid, but at his crew, Sal, Maria, Jake, and the others from Engine 17 who had gathered. Their faces were a mixture of shock at their captain's sudden action and a fierce, unwavering loyalty. "Sentinels," Mark said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight of command, cutting through the surrounding chaos. "Down tools." The order was unprecedented, unthinkable. To stop fighting a fire, especially one of this magnitude with lives and property still at risk, it went against every instinct, every ounce of training they had. But the look in their captain's eyes, the quiet fury, the profound sense of a line crossed, resonated with them. They had just witnessed their leader, a man they would follow into any hell, be assaulted, humiliated, and threatened by an officer who was clearly out of control, blinded by malice. Sal DeLuca was the first to react. Without a word, he turned to the pump panel of Engine 17 and, with a decisive movement, throttled down the engine, cutting pressure to their hose lines. The powerful stream of water that had been battling the flames faltered, then died. Maria Rodriguez and Jake Johnson, their expressions grim, lowered the nozzle of their 2.5-inch line to the ground. Other members of Engine 17, seeing their captain's resolve and their comrades' actions, followed suit. One by one, they stepped back from their positions. Their tools, axes, Halligan bars, hose lines, laid carefully, almost reverently, on the asphalt. They didn't shout. They didn't make a scene. They simply stopped. And then, in a silent, powerful display of solidarity, the entire crew of Engine 17, the Sentinels, turned their backs on the raging fire and began to walk, slowly and deliberately, away from the active fire ground, assembling behind their captain. Battalion Chief Walker, who had been trying to direct other incoming units, stared in stunned disbelief. "Stone! Engine 17, what in God's name are you doing?" he roared over the radio, his voice cracking with incredulity. Mark Stone picked up his radio, his voice calm but bing-lang. "Battalion Chief Walker," he transmitted, "Engine Company 17 is officially standing down from this incident. We will not continue operations while our captain is assaulted, and our crew is threatened by an out-of-control police officer who is actively endangering this scene. Officer Kincaid is a clear and present danger to firefighter safety. Until Officer Kincaid is removed from this fire ground and this situation is rectified, Engine 17 will not and cannot resume its duties. The safety of my crew is my primary responsibility." The radio silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the roar of the unchecked flames and the frantic crosstalk from other units, suddenly realizing that the primary attack engine, the first in company, had just walked off the job. The hidden power of their brotherhood, their unwavering loyalty to their captain and to each other, had manifested in the most dramatic and consequential way possible. They had drawn a line in the ashes. They had chosen their captain over the chaos, principle over protocol. Officer Kincaid, still scrambling to his feet, his face now a mask of apoplectic rage and dawning panic as he realized the magnitude of what was happening, began to scream incoherently, but no one was listening to him anymore. All eyes, all attention, were fixed on the silent, retreating figures of Engine 17, their walk-off a stunning, unprecedented rebuke to an abuse of power that had finally pushed them too far. The fire still raged, but the battle lines had just been redrawn, and the fight for justice had just begun. The unprecedented walk-off by Captain Mark Stone and the entire crew of Engine 17 sent immediate seismic shockwaves through the Oakhaven emergency services. command structure, and, within minutes, to the highest levels of city government. The sight of a frontline engine company abandoning their posts in the face of a raging inferno was not just shocking. It was a full-blown crisis, a public safety nightmare unfolding in real time. Battalion Chief Walker, his face a mask of disbelief and barely suppressed fury, was on his radio, his voice cracking with urgency. "Dispatch, notify the fire commissioner, notify the mayor's office. Engine 17 has walked off the Northwood textile fire. I repeat, Engine 17 has stood down, citing officer-involved assault on their captain. Get me a deputy chief to this scene ASAP, and somebody get Kincaid out of my sight." Officer Kincaid, now on his feet, was sputtering, his face contorted in a mixture of rage and dawning terror, as he realized the cataclysmic consequences of his actions. Several OPD sergeants, drawn by the escalating chaos, were attempting to ascertain what had happened, their expressions grim. Kincaid's initial wild accusations against Captain Stone were now being drowned out by the stark reality of an entire fire crew abandoning a critical firefight because of his conduct. The narrative was rapidly shifting against him. The fire, meanwhile, paid no heed to human drama. Freed from the primary attack by Engine 17, the flames in the old textile warehouse surged with renewed ferocity, licking higher up the brick walls, threatening to breach the roof and send a shower of burning embers onto the exposed residential buildings nearby. Other engine companies already on scene or just arriving scrambled to redeploy, their efforts hampered by the sudden vacuum left by Engine 17's departure and the sheer confusion of the situation. The incident command system designed for orderly response was teetering on the brink of collapse. Within 20 minutes, the scene was swarming with brass. Fire Commissioner Julia Hastings, a formidable woman known for her operational expertise and zero tolerance for incompetence, arrived, her face a thundercloud. Deputy Police Chief Alan Brady, a different one from the previous story, but equally authoritative, was also on scene, tasked by the now frantic mayor's office to get a handle on the OPD side of the debacle. Commissioner Hastings immediately sought out Captain Stone and his crew, who were now assembled near their engine, a silent, resolute phalanx. "Captain Stone," Hastings said, her voice tight but controlled, "I need an explanation, and it better be a damn good one. You know the consequences of abandoning your post." Mark Stone, his face still smudged with soot, his eyes weary but unyielding, recounted the events calmly and precisely. Kincaid's interference, the unprovoked verbal abuse, the physical assault, the threat with pepper spray, and his ultimate decision to prioritize his crew's safety and dignity over continuing to operate in a hostile and dangerous environment created by a police officer. Sal DeLuca, Maria Rodriguez, and Jake Johnson corroborated every word, their testimonies delivered with a quiet fury that was more impactful than any shouting. Deputy Chief Brady, meanwhile, was getting an earful from a visibly shaken B.C. Walker and several OPD sergeants who had witnessed Kincaid's meltdown. Kincaid himself, now looking small and increasingly isolated, was attempting to spin his version of events, but his credibility was evaporating with every passing second. The presence of multiple firefighter eyewitnesses, all backing Captain Stone, was damning. "This is an outrage, Brady," Commissioner Hastings declared, turning to the deputy police chief. "My firefighters are out here risking their lives, and one of your officers assaults a captain on the fire ground. He creates a hostile situation, threatens them, and then expects them to just take it. This isn't just unprofessional, it's criminal." Brady, a career cop who valued interagency cooperation but also had no patience for rogue officers, looked grim. "Commissioner, I assure you we are taking this with the utmost seriousness. Officer Kincaid has been problematic in the past. His actions tonight, if they are as described, are indefensible. He turned to one of his sergeants. Sergeant, relieve Officer Kincaid of his duty weapon and badge immediately. Escort him back to the precinct. He is suspended, pending a full and immediate investigation by Internal Affairs and my office. He is to have no further contact with any member of the fire department. The sight of Officer Kincaid being disarmed and escorted away in disgrace, his face a mask of disbelief and humiliation, sent a ripple through the assembled police and firefighters. It was a swift, decisive action, a clear signal that his behavior would not be tolerated. With Kincaid removed, Commissioner Hastings turned back to Mark Stone. "Captain," she said, her tone somewhat mollified but still firm, "Officer Kincaid will be dealt with severely, but this fire is still raging. Those homes are still at risk. I need your crew. I need the sentinels." Mark looked at his crew. Their faces were grim, but the fire in their eyes, the loyalty was unwavering. He knew they would follow his lead. He also knew their duty. The immediate threat to their safety from Kincaid was gone. "Commissioner," Mark said, his voice resonating with authority, "Engine 17 is prepared to re-engage under your direct command, but we expect a full, transparent investigation into Officer Kincaid's assault on me and his endangerment of this entire operation, and we expect real consequences." "You have my word, Captain," Hastings replied, meeting his gaze. "Now, let's go save those homes." Engine 17, with a renewed sense of purpose and the unspoken but palpable support of every firefighter on the scene, went back to work. They battled the blaze with a controlled fury, their earlier anger now channeled into a ferocious determination. Their actions, both in walking off and in returning to the fight, had drawn a clear line. They would not tolerate abuse, but they would never abandon their city. The public condemnation of Kincaid's actions, once the story inevitably hit the news, fanned by unofficial footage from bystanders' phones and angry firefighters leaking details, was swift and overwhelming. The mayor's office was inundated with calls demanding Kincaid's immediate firing and even criminal charges. The Oakhaven Firefighters Union issued a blistering statement condemning the assault and supporting Engine 17's stand. The city was forced to confront not only a dangerous fire, but also a profound crisis of confidence in its police department, sparked by the arrogance of one officer and the courageous solidarity of a fire crew who refused to back down. The inferno at the Northwood Textile Warehouse was eventually brought under control, but not before leaving a gaping, smoldering wound on the city's landscape. More significantly, the confrontation between Officer Vince Kincaid and Captain Mark Stone and the subsequent walk-off by Engine 17 left an indelible mark on Oakhaven's emergency services and its civic consciousness. The investigation into Officer Kincaid's conduct was swift and, for once, decisive. The combined weight of eyewitness testimonies from multiple firefighters, including Battalion Chief Walker, Captain Stone's formal complaint, the unofficial cell phone footage that quickly went viral, and Kincaid's own checkered history of citizen complaints, created an irrefutable case. Internal Affairs, under intense pressure from the mayor's office, the fire commissioner, and a scandalized public, recommended Kincaid's immediate termination.